Hi, this is Winterhof, and this is a post-commentary track on the Speedrun Time and Eternity that I ran on December 31st. This is a bit of a weird game, and it doesn't help that I ran it with no HUD, so what I'm going to do is give you a play-by-play of what exactly I did, and a little bit of commentary on the story as well. So we're starting the story off a day before the wedding. Our main character, Zach, is going to be married to Princess Toki of Kamza Kingdom. Right now, we aren't doing much. This is just a tutorial on how to talk to other characters in the main hub. So we're met with Toki, the princess, on the far left, Enda, who is the youngest of the group. To the right of Enda, the brown-haired girl Reijo, who is kind of the uppity socialite of the group. And to the right of Reijo, we have Weddy, the black-haired girl, who is the party planner. On right of the Weddy, we have Zach, the blue-haired character, and Toki's pet, Drake, which is the small blue dragon. When the wedding happens, it doesn't go well. There's an assassination, and as a result of the assassination, Zach is almost fatally wounded, and Toki unleashes her time magic powers to go back in time to a few weeks before the wedding. This game is weird. That's all I'm going to say. The plot is nonsensical and is very tongue-in-cheek. It's supposed to be making fun of time travel tropes and the JRPG tropes in general, but I'll get to that when it becomes pertinent. Right now, we are going through the navigation of the game, so it is in a third-person perspective. If you're familiar with the Third Birthday, the running is kind of similar in that you're always behind the character, and this is our first battle. Blink and you miss it. You just saw the HUD just flash on the screen, and I immediately removed that. And you can do that by tapping the R3 button on the PS3 twice. I did this challenge largely just, I felt like it. There's really no reason why I did this, but aside just to show off my skill with this game and my familiarity with the game. And I kept the volume low right now because when I recorded this game, I had a lot of issues recording with my capture card. So when I did get the capture software to work on my laptop, I didn't really care about the audio quality, and as a result, you're getting this really bad echo. So you're going to have to excuse that. I have now gotten a better control of the capture software and more familiarity with it, but this is the best run I've had for a while, so I'm going to have to commentate on a run that's really high skill, but very poor audio, so you're just going to have to bear with it. Going back to the story, when we went back to the past, we went back a few months, and as a result, Toki didn't really know where she was, so she had to scramble through Kamza Forest back to her old home. Right now, we think we know the assassins that are behind the assassination attempt, and it turns out they're in town. When we confront them, we are confronted with two characters, Linus and Lucy, and their leader, Ricardo. Right now, they don't really put that much of a fight, and this is the combat so far. It's in real time. It kind of looks like Lightning Returns or Black Rock Shooter, the game, where you are... It's really weird to explain. I'll get more into it after this second battle, but what you do is you dodge in real time, you cast your skills in real time, and the battle system revolves around you reacting to enemies and their attacks. Right now, we are also met with the transformation mechanic. I will get into that soon. But this blonde-haired lady, Toa, is much better at close combat. She uses a knife in combat, but we're also given our first skill in this game. So if I were to open up the skill menu, or open up the HUD, we have this bar of SP, or skill points, where we can fill up to 10 bars, and we can use skill points to execute these skills. Right now, the skill that I'm using, Shrouded Moon, I believe, costs 5 SP or 50 SP to execute, but we have to build up that SP by using basic attacks. So when you're seeing me use 2 knife hits, left and right, and I pause, I'm using kind of an animation cancel, where I use the first 2 attacks that are relatively quick in execution, and I'm ignoring the third attack where Toa does this massive roundhouse kick. That takes a lot of time, takes a lot of frames, and most importantly, drops the combo. On the right of the screen, you're going to see this combo meter, and this is very important to keeping our damage up. Excuse me. In this fight with Ricardo, you notice that I dodge, because Ricardo's broadsword, if it hits Toa, will cause us to knock down. Here's another mechanic that I'll explain soon, called the Fatal Attack Chance, and what Fatal Attack Chance is kind of an execute. The Fatal Attack Chance happens only if your opponent is about less than 5% health remaining and is a boss, and what you do is if you hit circle, you do this very fancy, very anime-like execution that instantly kills the enemy. We don't do that because it wastes a lot of time, so I try to avoid it as best as possible. Going back to the story, so the reason why Toki can transform into Toa is because they share a body, and we don't know why they do it, but they just do. Right now, our character, Zack, who is in the body of Drake, and I'll get to that soon because the game hasn't explained that yet, but right now, from our main character's perspective, Toa seems to be like this defensive mechanism for Toki when she's in danger. Toki's character is very passive, very gentle, and Toa's character is very harsh, very violent. So, from Drake's perspective, Toa is this magical defense where if Toki is ever in danger, Toa comes out and protects Toki. What we're doing next in terms of plot is, it turns out that Linus, Lucy, and Ricardo aren't assassins. In fact, they're assassins. They're fans of assassins, to the point where they don't really do assassinations, they just bake cakes. Their fascination with assassins is just a hobby. After getting more information from Ricardo, it turns out that the actual assassins are split up in 3 isles. Saccharum Isle, Panela Isle, and a third isle that just escapes my name. Or whose name escapes me. This is largely what you're going to be seeing in the run. You're going to be going from area to area, running away from fights, and really there isn't much to this run. A lot of it is just going from point A to point B. The real skill of this run comes from fighting the bosses, knowing their timing, and really just executing those fights very well. There is the end fight in Chapter 1, which we'll be seeing Roboss, which is very demanding in execution. But right now, we are going to confront some of the actual assassins, and they are palette swaps of Linus, Lucy. So there really isn't much right now to this fight. It is just keeping up the combo and interrupting the assassin when she uses her attacks, because that will interrupt us and we drop our combo, and as a result we do less damage. After this, we get introduced to the gift point mechanic, and gift points are kind of like a resource where you can use to learn new skills, and these skills are learned as you level up. This is very important in the run, and the menuing that I do in order to get these skills are very tight and not very tight, but in terms of timing and when you want to get them, they're tight, because if you miss the timing to get those menus and you level up too early or too late, you have to get another level up in order to get those skills. This is very important towards the end of the game, where I menu in one skill, Frost. If I do not menu in Frost at the right time, I have to find a way to grind one level, and for me that's Rip Run. So right now I menued this item called the Spicy Candy, which reduces the encounter rate. I didn't talk about encounter rate yet, but if you look up on the top left of the screen, you're going to see the small green bar rising. That is the encounter rate. It's very similar to Legend of the Dragoon's encounter rate system, where the more you walk, the more you build up this meter, where when that meter fills up, you have a guaranteed fight. Excuse me. This is the encounter meter is a Image Epic staple. Image Epic is the developer that made these games, and this is not uncommon with Image Epic games. 7th Dragon and all of its iterations of 7th Dragon do something very similar to this. It's also very similar to Etrian Odyssey, where you walk a certain amount of steps and then you have a guaranteed fight. You can manipulate this through Spicy Candy and another item, Sweet Candy, which increases the encounter rate. Right now, we are just going and finding and confronting the other assassins, so this is going to take a very long time, so I'm going to scale back on the commentary just a little bit. Maybe I can explain that Drake, the reason why Zack, your main character, is in the body of Drake is because when Toki went back in time, when you go back in time, your soul goes back in time, and your soul searches for where your body was at that specific moment in time, I believe. So when Toki went back in time, she also brought along Zack, and that was unintentional. When she brought along Zack's soul, however, Zack's soul didn't have a place to go to, so Zack's soul went into the body of Drake, and Drake is now being possessed by the present version of Zack. So that's the reason why Drake is talking. Here we get the next assassin, the Courier. Courier is kind of a tropey character. He's supposed to be an assassin, but the way Toki interrogates Courier is done in such a way where Courier accidentally reveals the assassin's plan, that there really is no plan to attack the wedding. So he does also unwittingly reveal that there's no plan, and what Toki's doing is really just almost framing the Assassin's Guild for something that they haven't done. This is going to come in, this is going to be a problem soon, and what the Courier also reveals is the existence of something called a Babbleberry. And a Babbleberry, if you consume that, any animal can talk in human speech. What we've also seen here in this fight is the final attack chance, where by pressing circle, you do this very over-the-top attack, which does take some time, but I did do it just because I didn't think I have enough SP to kill the Courier, and I thought that would be a time loss, so I just committed to the fatal attack chance, which I know kills Courier. this is the third of the assassins that we have to confront, and what I do now is equip the Witch's Headband. I picked up the Witch's Headband back a few islands ago, and what the Witch's Headband does is it increases our magic attack. I also menued in learning Fire Magician and Bolt Magician on both Toki and Toa. What this does is that this gives me Fire on Toki and Bolt on Toa. I also pick up this item called the Pepper, which forcibly changes Toki to Toa and vice versa. Normally, when you try to transform and change between Toki and Toa, you have to level up. This is going to be problematic towards the end of the game, where I use primarily Toa to get me through some of the fights. So, if I want to make sure that I'm fighting these fights optimally, I have to use Toa. The third assassin we are going to confront is Mute, and Mute is really the first point in the game where you do have a challenging fight. The first two fights of Linus's palette swap and Lucy's palette swap are largely just more of the same thing of Linus and Lucy, which are both pretty much giveaway fights. Mute is a little bit challenging, but what I do here is I take advantage of closing the gap after dodging his first initial wave of attacks. And I'll show you what I mean when we enter this fight. So when we enter the fight, Mute is going to launch 5 arrows in quick succession at us, so I have to dodge. I didn't dodge because I wanted to build up my SP gauge just with certainty, because I can't see it right now. Usually I'd be guarding. So when I close in the gap, you're going to notice that Mute is going to first spend a little bit of time not attacking. And he's going to be using these 2 attacks, which will knock us down. So I have to dodge 3 sets of 2 attacks that knock us down, upon which Mute will enter this phase where he just attacks us and doesn't stagger us. After a while, Mute will pause and will repeat the cycle of 2 knockdown attacks over a course of 3 repeats. I use the final attack here to get me a guaranteed kill because I don't have enough SP to use another flare. Now, in terms of story, we're going back. We revealed that the assassin's hideout is... We've revealed that the assassins really don't have a plan. Ricardo is also helping us to find where the assassins are. So what we're doing next is meeting up with Ricardo and finding out where the hideout is so we can confront them, where we can confront the assassin's leader once and for all, and finally determine if there really is a hit on Toki. This is a kind of a slow stretch of game until we hit Robos, so I really won't be commenting this much. There's really not much to comment on right now, aside from the menus, and maybe I can talk about the money route. The money route is a little bit strict. the shops that I take are really done to reduce the amount of times that I enter a shop, and most importantly, reduce the amount of money that I have on hand. When I escape from fights, the consequence to escaping from fights is that I lose 3% of the money that I have on hand. This does add up over the course of the game, so I want to keep my money on hand as low as possible, so that way I lose the least amount of money when I do run away. Right now, we are going to get a Babbleberry. I don't really remember the lore of this game all that much. I am reviewing the lore. It's a little bit... It takes a while, mostly because this game doesn't really make sense, and it's really just... I really don't like the lore of this game. It's very bizarre, very weird. I am reviewing it. It is just a slow process. I think now is a good time to talk about some of the tone of this game. The tone of this game is extremely lighthearted. If you haven't heard already, and if my explanation of this game hasn't been up to par, we're already fighting assassins. The first set of enemies that we fight are assassins fanboys, and the story really doesn't take itself seriously. This is really when the story really shows and really plays its hand at being a nonsensical story. And this is the one scene that I say is almost prophetic, because this game came out in 2012. It predicted chicken tendies as a meme. It also predicted the rise of Budabra. And if you don't know who Budabra is, there's a man on Fit who ate 50 eggs in one sitting. Almost killed himself, and Toki just goes off on this tangent about eggs, and it almost seems prophetic in a way, but in a way that I want to see what I want to see. I do pick up items here, the Thunder Cutter and the Thunder Splitter, because I do want to make sure that I have enough money to have when I do this big menu towards the end of the game. If you notice the lag spikes, this is largely due to the capture software that I'm using, and I think it's also my laptop struggling to keep up. My laptop is very old, but when I was playing this game on the PS3, there were only 2 lag spikes that I could tell from the PS3, and that comes in Chapter 2. But really, the lag spikes that you're seeing on this video are largely just from my laptop struggling to keep up. So the next area we're going to is the Southern Canyon, and this is where the babbleberries grow. So I think at this point in the game, I think Toki is very curious about what Drake is trying to say, and after the courier mentioned the existence of babbleberries, along with the fact that there is no hit on the royal wedding, I think that just piqued Toki's interest, and she just wants to make sure, and she's curious about what Drake is trying to say. I'm going to be a little bit quiet here because there are some pretty good lines that Drake and Toki do say.
I wonder what you have to say, Drake.
What do you want me to say?
I can only imagine how funny you must be. I always have a great time with you around, Drake.
That's good to hear.
You might even make me bust out laughing the second you start talking.
Okay, let's not raise that bar too high now.
Are you?
Do you notice this game has a lot of palette swaps? That's kind of the issue with this game. There's
You're even funnier than all those funny but not famous yet comedians out there.
there's a line that I'm looking for. But as I was saying, the game critically wasn't received very well. A lot of critics did call out the palette swaps, kind of somewhat repetitive play, and some of the animation issues as well. Oddly enough, the animation studio that did all of the animations was Statelight, and you might know Statelight from their anime Symphogear. So, Symphogear is an anime that is notable or even notorious for its very low budget. And if you can see the low budget in Toki's walking animation, well, it's a Statelight. It's a Statelight product. Oddly enough, the loading screens that you see for Toki and Toa are made by the artist Vofon, and Vofon is a very famous artist who did the artwork for the Monogatari series, Bage Monogatari, Nisei Monogatari. So if you see any of that, so Image Epic brought in a lot of pretty, I'd say, big names, at least for the concept art, but when it came to the animation, they did use Statelight at the time, which wasn't very big. So they brought in Vofon for at least the concept art, but everything else they did cut corners with, if I have to be critical about it. The animations also tend to repeat, and there aren't that many of them, so throughout the course of the game, you're going to be seeing a lot of these repeated animations. You're going to see where the animation does fall apart. So it is to comedic effect, and if we are thinking about this game, the fact that the animations are kind of bad also just adds to the nonsensical tone of this game. Right now, we are going to find Ricardo, and this is where we fight Roboss. This is the Chapter 1 boss, and this is a very, very difficult fight. So I equip the strongest weapon that I have right now, the Stone Blaster, just to get me a little bit more damage. So I make sure that I can kill the boss with a combination of regular attacks and flare. If it isn't obvious already, we are going to be seeing a lot of reused assets, especially in navigation, so we're going to be seeing a lot of the same thing throughout the course of the game. With tracks, there are only 8 tracks in this game, so much to the point that purchasing this game came with an audio CD with all the tracks in it. So this is going to be a very repetitive game. Oddly enough, the game is 16 gigs. The PSN download was about 16 gigs, and the game also downloads 4 gigabytes of data onto your PS3. So I think all the size of this game is largely with the voice acting and probably the animations, because almost all of the lines in this game are voiced. So coming up, as I mentioned, is Roboss. So what Roboss is this is kind of your wake-up call fight. So if you've managed to get through mute by just coasting along and just spamming and getting lucky, Robos is really going to punish the is really going to punish an aggressive playstyle. So what Robos does in the beginning of his fight is he starts off with 2 Gatling guns, and these Gatling guns at this level will, if you get hit, will kill you. So you can survive 1 volley of Gatling gun attacks, but a second attack will immediately kill you. I enter a menu here just to top off my health, and afterwards he follows this very set pattern, which I use to my advantage. This is me just making sure I've menued everything correctly, because I have lost several runs to this. The assassin's leader is a robot, so in this fight, I'm going to start guarding and dodge. I hit 3 to 4 times to build up my SP, guard again, and then I'm going to attack a few times again. What Robos is going to do next is charge up his spell, Eclipse. So since I know he's going to use Eclipse 4 times in a row, I can use this time to build up my SP gauge and attack Flare when I know I have enough SP built up. Afterwards, he's going to attack with a couple of Gatling gun attacks, so I do have to guard and be careful. And he's going to use another set of Eclipse. He's going to stop, and he's going to charge us. And this time, he's going to attempt to knock us down, which is catastrophic. If he knocks us down, I lose all of my saved up SP. I tried to do a menu here when Robos was jumping back to use Flare. If I have the exact timing perfect, I can get a Flare in right before he uses Frost. And Frost is a very quick casting spell, which does a lot of damage and is comparable to Eclipse. So instead, I'm going to have to wait until Robos charges me again, and afterwards Robos is going to attack with Gatling gun. I commit to getting hit, and I pause again for another set of Eclipse attacks. This is a very long fight, and the previous world record holder, Mocha Puyo, does this fight very well and does it very quickly. I have been unable to repeat what he does because his strategy is very aggressive, and for some reason I can't get this timing of using flares as well as he can. So I have to opt for a much safer and much longer fight, although I can do this fight more consistently. So if you watch Mocha Puyo's run, he does this strategy where he uses flare, and after Robos stops and attempts to charge us, he uses flare to knock Robos back, and upon which Mocha Puyo will charge Robos, and then do this cycle where he dodges Robos's melee attacks and can finish off Robos by using flare. So I can't repeat that because I'm also working with no heads-up display, so I don't know how much SP I have, so I can't play that risky. But if you want to watch Mocha Puyo's run, his tactics are much more aggressive than mine. Mine are more cautious and more consistent. So for Chapter 2, Robos... So the reason why Robos attacks us back when we went back a few months later is because it turns out when we went to the past, we were heckling the Assassin's Guild. And we managed to make such a big scene that everyone in the underground apparently caught wind of that, upon which that we were framing the Assassin's Guild for an assassination attempt that they're not doing. And Robos, in his infinite wisdom, decided to attack a wedding in order to save face as an Assassin's Guild. So this is kind of cluing in that what we're doing by going back to the past is actually making things worse. Right now, the game hasn't called it out yet, but if you can see that there's a connection between us meddling in the past and what we're doing on the day of the wedding, this is going to become a central theme of this game, where going back to the past doesn't really solve all of our problems. While we do somehow avert the assassination attempt by defeating Robos, when we go back to the present and have the meeting again and have the wedding again, it turns out that Reijo, the brown-haired socialite and a member of Toki's group of friends, she attacks us and almost fatally stabs Toki. Toki goes back to the past and tries to find out why Reijo stabs us, and as a result, we're thrown back, I believe, months into the past, and we just need to find answers. Right now, we're in a forest far, far from our home in Kamsa, so we just have to get our bearings. As luck would have it, in this forest, we also stumble upon the Assassin's fanboys, Ricardo, Linus, and Lucy. I don't know what they're doing. I think they're trying to learn techniques to better improve their skills. So we are going back farther before we met Ricardo and everyone, but I think they have memories of us going back to the past. I'm not really sure how this works. I'm sorry. I do have to review Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 of this game. I know what happens in Chapter 4. It's just, this game is a blur for whatever reason. But here I do show that there is a fixed fight where you can run away from. The random battles in the Cursed Forest are a little bit challenging. The first enemy that I do fight, the Crypt Keeper, a palette swap of the brown plant golem that we did fight in Chapter 1, and the first fight that we see is very strict in terms of my timing to escape. So I have exactly 4 seconds to escape, and if I do not escape within those 4 seconds, I do have to die, take a game over, and retry again. What Time and Eternity does as a game is, if I were to die and game over in one fight, the game does give me the option to restart right at that fight, which I really do like. This is also an Image Epic staple with a few of their games. I know 7th Dragon does this. I know, I think Luminous Arc 2 does this. I believe 7th Dragon 3 and 7th Dragon 2022 do this as well. So I don't know if Blackrock Shooter does this, but Image Epic is very forgiving if you do lose, and in this game in particular, you can change the difficulty from normal to easy. And in terms of difficulty, what difficulty affects isn't the amount of health or the damage you deal to enemies, it affects the amount of damage enemies do to you. What I'm going to do here is set up a waypoint. I'm going to come back to this particular area in order to complete a quest, and I set up a waypoint here because it saves time. This is where I start diverging greatly from Mokapuya's route, where Mokapuya goes into another area entirely, but this quest that I take and the route that I take here saves about roughly a minute and a half of time. It is also worth noting that compared to the versions that Mokapuyo and I play, Mokapuyo runs the Japanese version, which is a Blu-ray disc only, whereas the versions in America both have a PSN digital download and a physical copy. So the PSN version has slightly faster load times. I haven't compared the load times, but I believe it's about 20% faster per load time, so this does add up. Unfortunately, the PSN download is now defunct. According to a website, it went away in about 2015 for whatever reason. So it is not possible to get a digital download, although through certain hoops, which I will not mention, you can get a digital download and get it running on your PS3. We do find out here that Reijo is talking to this somewhat shady character, Makimona. We don't know why yet, so we do follow Makimona back to her home, Apparition. And in order to gain Makimona's trust, we have to do a little bit of work for her. So this is the bulk of Chapter 2, where we are just doing a lot of side quests, and the side quests that we do are very simple. What we're basically doing for these side quests are going to point A to point B. These are very fast, and they also give us items called Condor Wings. I've been using items called Condor Wings for quite a bit, and they're very cheap. You can purchase them for about 100 gold each, and what they do is they instantly teleport me back from wherever I am in the dungeon back to the world map. These save minutes of backtracking. So I messed up an input here. I was supposed to go select the third choice, the fork in the road, the waypoint that I set up a few minutes ago, but I accidentally didn't do that. Some of the menuing is a little bit on the clunky side, but this is really my fault as a runner for not understanding and not preparing for that slightly slower menu. So I do lose about 10 seconds of that, but that's really my fault. What we're doing here is just... I don't even know what this quest line is, actually. I just take this quest because it's the easiest quest, and it gives us... it completes the quest by just talking to the NPC, and we can teleport back to Apparition. So after we do this quest, one quest is enough to gain Makimona's trust, effectively. What we're doing next is getting information from Makimona, and it turns out Reijo is trying to do a deal with the devil, almost. She is trying to back out of a deal she made years ago with this creature, the Nether Drake. What the Nether Drake is kind of like a genie. Kind of like a genie in the sense that if you wish for something, you will get what you wish for, but Nether Drake is going to call in a favor many years later down the line. We don't know what, and whatever we want, whatever Nether Drake is asking Reijo to do, we don't want her to do it. This is the longest stretch of plains in the game, the Wind Plains. You do see the spicy candy wear off in this area. So normally, spicy candies wear off after about 2 dungeons worth of trekking. But here, because we have to trek such a far distance, it wears off in the middle of this trek, and we do pick up another spicy candy along the way. So, most encounter reducing items in Image Epic games last for a certain distance, and for some reason in Toki, in Time and Eternity, the spicy candy does this weird approximation where if the game calculates that you're almost running out of a spicy candy, it's just going to flat out say that the spicy candy wore off when you enter a new area after it does that calculation, to my knowledge. I don't really know what goes on behind the scenes in this game. I largely just view the run from an empirical standpoint where I know what the game is doing, but I don't know what the game is calculating. So, that being said, I strongly think that if the game thinks that you're about to run out of spicy candy, it will just completely remove the effect of spicy candy when you enter a new area. This is a pretty boring patch of run. We do have to run through this area again, but it's a much shorter exit. And maybe I can talk about Image Epic in general. Image Epic is this company that you may have heard of, you may not have heard of. It's done games like Seventh Dragon, Luminous Arc. It's also done games like The Last Ranker, which was released on 2011 on the PSP that didn't come out. Yoko Shimomura did the songs for that game. It's very good. It also did a lot of questionable games, such as Criminal Girls and the remake of Toshin Toshi on the 3DS. The story behind Image Epic is very interesting for me. I really very genuinely think that the ideas behind Image Epic games are very unique and very original. It's that the execution for these games don't really turn out very well. I'm a very big fan of these games, particularly Sands of Destruction. I've sped-run a majority of these Image Epic games, and I am really just a fan of Image Epic games in general. I know where they break, I know where they fall apart, I know they're bad, but for some reason, I really consider them diamonds in the rough. Time and Eternity in particular, I do like because it almost predicted Lightning Returns and that combat system. This combat system that you're seeing in Time and Eternity is almost an adapted version of Blackrock Shooter, the game, which came out a year later and has a lot more polish, considerably, because Time and Eternity is a PS3 game. Blackrock Shooter, the game, is a PSP game. I also think that this also takes some cues from The Last Ranker, but I can't really be sure because The Last Ranker has more similarities with Blackrock Shooter, the game, especially in terms of how the skill system works in that game. But me fanboying on Image Epic aside, this stretch of run is pretty boring. I think I've also, I didn't mention it, but right when I started Chapter 2, I'm so confident in this chapter that I can run this chapter without any equipment whatsoever. And this is largely because the boss of the chapter, spoiler alert, it's going to be Netherdrake, according to my splits, but Netherdrake is a unique boss in that you deal fixed damage to Netherdrake because of a gameplay change. We go to Fruktoza Isle to finally confront and at least convince Reijo that making a deal with Netherdrake is not good, and we're going to try and pull her out of this. What I'm going to do here right now before confronting Netherdrake is picking up an item, the Cure-All. The Cure-All sells for a pretty good amount of money. It's 250 gold each, and in this chest we pick up 3 of them. I think that's another Image Epic staple as well, past Seventh Dragon, is that in their role-playing games, they tend to drop multiple items in one chest. This is something that Saigo no Yakusoko no Monogatari does. This is something I believe Soul Trigger does as well. So that's also kind of a trope that is included with some of these games. That big dragon that you're seeing in the horizon is Netherdrake. And it turns out here, we find out Reijo's past. Reijo wasn't always the very glamorous, very wealthy socialite she always was. She actually came from a poor family. And what Reijo wanted to be was, she wanted to be Toki's friend, because I believe she met Toki by chance, and Toki was so nice to Reijo, and Reijo just wanted to give whatever she could just to be friends with Toki, but because of her station and because of Toki's status as a princess of Kamsa, Reijo would be unable to be friends with Toki. So she made a deal with Netherdrake, I believe at a young age, to be rich. And as a result, she was able to use that wealth and that influence to become Toki's friend, and it would be socially acceptable. However, years later, Netherdrake is calling in that wish, and Netherdrake wishes to assassinate Toki. Reijo does not want that to happen because, well, Reijo is Toki's friend. But the problem is, if Reijo does not go through with assassinating Toki, Netherdrake is just going to take matters into its own hands and get rid of the friendship that Rejo built up by rescinding the wealth that Netherdrake bestowed onto Rejo. Now that we have Rejo, we're trying to convince her that wealth doesn't matter, and it's really the friendship matters. So Rejo is much more calmer now. She is much more willing to try to find a way to reason with Netherdrake to really rescind that decision and try to find a way where everybody is happy. Right now, we do have to go back to Makimona because we really don't know what we're dealing with. And it seems like Makimona does have some knowledge that we don't have, so again, we have to build up this trust and do another set of quests to make sure that she gives us the information we need. We are going to go through another a set of fetch quests, so I'm just going to go lay back and just take it easy for a bit until we find things more pertinent to talk about in the plot. So I'm just going to be right back. So at this point in the game, we really, I believe Rejo is kind of having a crisis of faith and really needs to just think about what she's doing. And the way to do that, according to the game, is to try to contact Rejo's deceased mother. The problem is, there isn't a good way to contact the dead right now, but we think we know a way, and it turns out Ricardo makes some really awful cakes. That's all I'm gonna say. But the cakes are so bad that once Rejo consumes this cake, the taste is so bad that Rejo begins to hallucinate to the point that she becomes a spiritual medium, and she is capable of speaking. Rejo is capable of speaking to her own deceased mother's spirit, and is able to find the confidence and the encouragement to stand up to Netherdrake. I am not kidding when I say this. This is actually part of the story. You have to believe me. I'm not smart enough, nor am I clever enough to come up with this joke. This is, I want to say, also an image epic trope where you have stretches of story that are very serious and sometimes a little bit emotional, especially when it comes to Rejo's story, and it just gets blasted out with one bizarre punchline. This happens in 7th Dragon 2020 and 2022 frequently, but I feel like in this game, that sort of writing actually makes sense and is actually very comedic. But now that Reijo has gotten the courage to stand up to Netherdrake, and with the support of Toki and Toa, we are going to fight. We're really just going to confront Netherdrake and say that we need to renegotiate this contract. So this is another stretch of just going through forests. This is really just chapter 2. So I'm going to sit back again and just wait until we find something new to talk about. Well, there is something to talk about. This item I picked up, the Time Splinter, is going to come in handy towards the end of the game. There is another resource, which I will talk about in Chapter 3, that we do use, and Time Splinters are consumed in order to replenish that resource. Right now... Well, maybe I can talk about the music. I did mention that this game only has about 8 tracks. The musician behind all of this is the same musician that composed the Etrian Odyssey series. So if you hear the Toa's battle theme, it does sound very similar to Etrian Odyssey 4's battle theme. I believe Fate is My Pillar. So there are some motifs that the composer uses that I do find pretty similar. But really, on the world map, I can't really tell that the composer of Etrian Odyssey did this music, but in battle, it is very obvious.
Better than I was before, but I still don't like being in places like this.
Oh, I totally forgot about Toki's
I'm not scared.
trait. So Toki has this... Toki is a tough character, right?
I'm not scared.
The only thing that she is afraid of are spooky forests, ghosts, and spiders, I believe. So she's pretty tsundere.
What's wrong?
Oh, sorry. Did you say something?
It's one of those endearing traits about
With you.
Toa. My mistake, Toa.
Anything.
So Toa is afraid of spiders and ghosts. Oh, I totally forgot about one character, Sanders. Okay, Sanders... So when Toki goes back to the past, she calls upon the spirit of residing in her hourglass, and I'll show you what I mean if we come across a loading screen. It's in her art. But she calls upon the spirit Sanders, the sand in the hourglass, in order to help her go back in time. Sanders doesn't talk much. He does have a couple of one-liners, and if you notice right on Toa's belt there, right on her left arm, there's a little hourglass with pink sand. That's Sanders. That color actually changes with whenever Toki or Toa transforms into their... when they transform. So with Toki, the official artwork is, I believe, blue sand, whereas Toa's sand is pink. So the way we confront Netherdrake, we say that what you're doing is wrong, and Drake finds out that there is that Netherdrake is abusing a loophole, because whatever Reijo does, if Reijo assassinates Toki, the friendship is over, and she is betraying Toki. If Reijo does not go through with the plan to assassinate, Netherdrake will repossess all of the wealth that Netherdrake bestowed onto Reijo. The problem is, so Drake finds out that Reijo is really damned if she does, damned if she doesn't, and this is a bad contract. So the way Drake decides to threaten Netherdrake is to complain to the Better Business Bureau of his shady business practices, and as a result, he may get his wish-granting license revoked. Maybe I just should have talked about the fight instead. The fight, as we've just seen, is a little bit of a hybrid of how we're navigating on the world map and almost like a rail shooter. The game gives us fixed damage for whatever reason, so all we really have to do is strafe left and right and dodge Netherdrake's attacks. It's a very simple fight. In a casual play, it's actually very difficult because it's an unexpected gameplay change from out of nowhere, so really the difficulty from that fight is just complete confusion and just getting used to the really bad delay on your attacks. When you attack, you have this almost 2 to 3 second delay before you can even move again. So it's really just finding that balancing act and finding those visual cues for you to dodge and keep counterattacking. Chapter 3 happens, and we do prevent Reijo assassinating us, but the problem is Makimona decides to crash the wedding because she wants to get married too. So as a result, Weddy, the wedding planner, decides to intervene and tells us the one secret code in case everything goes wrong. Weddy, you're so cute. So we go back, I believe, 2 months before the wedding. We tell Weddy that she is cute, and she finds out that something went wrong. It turns out that we're supposed to collect these 4 items. The something 4. Something borrowed, something old, something new, and something blue. In order to have enough power to stop the wedding from being crashed. Just don't think about the name something 4. Don't think about that one of the actual items, one of the actual MacGuffins is called something blue or something new. Just don't think about it. What I'm doing here is a really big menu. I'm selling a lot of my items to to purchase things called bookworm charms, broccoli, and an upgrade on our equipment. So a new rifle, a new tiara, which increases attack, and a new belt, which increases all of our stats. What I want is to have 5 bookworm charms, which increase the experience gain from battles, because we're going to be entering a grind session. What we're doing first is learning some new abilities. I'm also going to be doing this really huge menu to learn almost all the necessary skills we're going to be using towards the end of the game. Right now, we're learning this skill called Time Surge. I call it Gamer Time because in this state, this is when the run starts happening. This is where the magic happens. So on Toa, I'm learning Black Magician, Martial Artist, Twin Tail, a Striker, and Beastmaster. All of these skills give me all the necessary abilities that I'm going to need until the end of the game, with the exception of one magic spell that I have to menu in the middle of this chapter. I'm going to show off Time Surge, and what Time Surge is that it slows down. It makes it look like the enemy is being slowed down, but in reality, my animations are twice as fast on Toki or Toa. So this is going to be very essential to the rest of the game, and it uses this resource called, I believe, time points. So we have a total of 3 right now, and what we're doing is entering Time Surge, and notice how fast we're attacking and how fast we're casting. What I want to prevent is this enemy charging me, because if this enemy charges me, it's going to deal a lot of damage, and we run out of something called bonus experience. Bonus experience is awarded to the player if they do not get hit. So it's not that much, it's about 20 to 30 experience, but this does add up, especially when we are grinding. The grind in this game is about 10 minutes long, and it gets us from, I believe, level 6 to level 14. What we're doing here is getting another skill called Time Rewind, which we do not use, but it does use the same time points as Time Surge. Time Leap basically takes us back in time, so in case we do something bad, we have a pretty much go backwards button. What we're taking advantage of here is that if we do not use Time Leap in the next battle, the game says, look, you can't beat this quest until you actually use Time Leap. So we are creating a situation where we can fight this one enemy infinitely. So in combination with a Bookworm Charm increases the bonus experience you gain by 50% of the experience that you earned from the battle. So we earned 489 XP. The bonus experience we gain from Bookworm Charm is going to be 240. In addition, we get we get an extra, I believe, 23 experience by not getting damaged. If you notice, I made a bit of a bad input and a bad call, and I got hit with Toa. The problem with Toa is that when she fires her rifle, she gets this weird delay after 3 shots. Toki does not have this delay, so I have to be a lot more prudent with Toa in Time Surge. So what I do is I do this pattern of 3 shots, hold, pattern of 3 shots again, use bolts because the enemy is going to charge me. When the enemy is charging me after I use bolt, it gets knocked back. Afterwards, I can fire 3 or 4 more shots and cast bolt again, because bolt requires using bolt twice requires 100 SP. So I have to build up that 100 SP, and it's a little bit difficult to do with Toa. With Toki, because there is no delay on her rifle shots, I can just fire 12 shots immediately and launch 2 flares immediately. So it looks a lot cleaner when I'm doing it with Toki than I am with Toa. This is where Toki begins to shine a lot more, because Toki's fights are a lot faster, I'd say by about 2 to 3 seconds. So I want to avoid using Toa as much as possible. In general, the Bookworm Charms last for 5 fights each. So if I have 5 Bookworm Charms, I'm going to be using 25 fights. It turns out this is exactly the amount of fights that we need in order to hit level 14. So I do have to count and be very careful to not enter a fight without Bookworm Charm, because otherwise I will mess up some of the experience route, and I can mess up the pepper routing as well. I do pick up extra peppers as well, because in Mokopuyo's route, he does use all 4 peppers. In my route, I do use 3 peppers, but it's always good to have an extra pepper, because the safety peppers that I have to get are very much out of the way and take, I think, almost 2 minutes of tracking just to get an extra pepper. So I do not want to take extra peppers, and I do not want to mess up my item and experience route as I've set it up. Now, going into the reason why I'm doing this grinding is because I want to get a bunch of skills on Toa, my mistake. Toa needs this one skill called Rising Dragon, which is a 70 SP attack that deals a massive amount of damage, and in addition to increasing the rate at which SP regenerates. So in theory, by using Rising Dragon, you can spam Rising Dragon in between a few attacks to deal huge amounts of damage. This is the only way I can beat the rest of the game. And this is the only way Mokopuyo can beat the rest of the game as well. In addition, we also get this skill called Slot Switch. Slot Switch is very similar to kind of like skill reels in Order of Ecclesia, the Castlevania game, where you can swap between different presets of skills. In this game, you have 3 buttons to press for skills. That is triangle, square, and X. For this route, I need to use 4 skills. So I need to unlock an extra set of skill slots in order to use on the fly, in order to use all of those 4 skills. The skills that I'm going to be using for the endgame are Bolt, Frost, Rising Dragon, and the skill called Dragon of Battle. Dragon of Battle I learn at level, I believe, 14. And what Dragon of Battle does is, for a measly 10 SP, I can command a Drake to buff my attack. The attack buff is quite literally a double damage buff for, I'd say, about 30 seconds. And this is, again, critical with the damage boosting that I'm doing. So with the damage boost, I will show you in the later fights with Makimona and one of the mid bosses, Ainu, you really need all of this damage to stack up, because this is the only way you're getting through some of those fights. The game does not expect you to be at level 14 at Chapter 3. In fact, the game wants you to be at level 40 by this point in the game, and the game at endgame wants you to be at level 60. This is really only done because we're abusing the combo system. And this is really the only reason why we have a speedrun, because otherwise grinding in this game would take hours. This is also one of the criticisms of this game, in that it's very difficult to grind and to gain experience. So, for comparison, the experience that we're getting from this one fight is comparable to the experience that we're gaining in this chapter. So in this chapter, we're fighting, I'd say, level 40 enemies, and not just one level 40 enemy. We're fighting 3 to 4 level 40 enemies in one battle. The way the game handles multiple enemies is that you fight one enemy at a time. If you remember back in Chapter 1, we fought Linus and Lucy. After we defeated Lucy, the game the game changed cameras to Linus, and the game wants you to fight one enemy at a time. You can't switch from enemy to enemy like you can in Blackrock Shooter, the game. So this takes a very, very long time, and while enemies are very easy to defeat, it's going to take a burn on our time, and we can't have that. The game is also very criticized for, if you're not using spicy candies, the encounter rate is very high. What the spicy candy does is halve the encounter rate, and I still think that that encounter rate is a little bit high. For reference, one of the Image Epic games, Seventh Dragon, has an absurdly high encounter rate that the fan translator, Jeff Ombre, included a hard mod, that reduced the encounter rate by 50%, and that made the game playable. So, really, Image Epic, as a criticism, has a bad tendency to throw in a lot of random encounters as a way of padding. What we're doing here is just trying to... What we're really trying to do is just skirt past that encounter rate. In the speedrun, Saigo no Yakusoku no Monogatari, we don't get encounter reducing items until Chapter 4, which is the end game. For reference, that speedrun is 2.5 hours to 3 hours long. We don't get an encounter reducing items until, I believe, 2 hours into that game. Furthermore, the sequel to Saigo no Yakusoku no Monogatari, Soul Trigger, doesn't even have encounter manipulating items. We only get one character that gets you a guaranteed escape from a battle, and you don't even get that halfway through that game. So that is kind of one of the problems of Image Epic. Maybe even going on to this problem of Image Epic, Criminal Girls is flat out unbeatable without extreme level grinding. Once you hit the first area of the game, oh, my mistake. I'm sorry, that was SCP. You didn't see anything. As I was saying, the Criminal Girls is unbeatable without excessive grinding. So this is really just kind of an Image Epic staple, unfortunately. Even the Sands of Destruction has Sands of Destruction speedrun has one really big grinding session. I don't know if Aeon Frodo reduced the grinding session towards the middle of the game, but all of the games that Image Epic, all the speed games that are published or made by Image Epic require grinding in some form or another. That is a definite. That just is. We are hitting the end of this grind session, so I think I do menu and just show how tight this grind session is. And when we do level up to level 14, we have about 83 to 85 experience surplus from the jump from level 13 to level 14. So it's a very calculated grind session, and I really do like this. So in this part, you do see me menu in a time splinter. So I do have to menu in a time splinter in order to use both time leap and time surge at the same time. So I am finishing this grind session. And that will bring us to the actual stretch of Chapter 3, where we do get the something 4. When we go to the something 4, we have to talk to Makimona again. And Makimona is, I'd say, a little bit upset right now because she can't find a boyfriend. She's just very upset that she can't find a boyfriend, and what we are trying to do is ease her with her relationship troubles, and we just want her to help us. So Drake or Zach decides to volunteer some of his buddies in the guard, in the Royal Guard, who might be interested. So that does give her a little bit of ease. I do menu in Bolt and Rising Dragon, and I also menu in the Frost Magician, so that way when I hit level 15, I'm ready to learn Frost. I'm also menuing in this other ability, Stun Mastery 1, which increases the likelihood of enemies being stunned. What stunned is this state where the enemy can't attack, but the damage that the enemy is dealt increases, I think it's twice as much as well, so all of this is multiplicative, and it's going to add up soon. So very soon you'll see what all of this preparation is for, but right now we are talking to Olden. He is the god who holds something old, and what Olden is giving us is a trial specifically for Drake, because this is going to measure his worth as a husband to Toa and Toki. So what Olden is going to do is give us all of these questions, and these questions right now are a little bit fuzzy to me, but the first question is that The first question is that Olden asks if you are in a conflict with your spouse. What do you do?
Just thinking the same thing.
Drake says, well, we can have a choice of... We have a choice, and it's usually down to two choices. Usually we can just pick the first choice, but really what Olden asks in this question he asks, our wedding is cancelled, so what are you most disappointed about? Drake answers, we're disappointed because we can't kiss. The questions get more and more raunchier and more suggestive as the further we get down the trial, and if you haven't noticed already, Olden is supposed to be a play on the dirty old man trope. This is also consistent in the Japanese version, I believe. This question asks, when your spouse returns from... When you return home, your spouse asks, what would you like first, a bath or me? Of course, being the nice, squeaky clean boys that we are, I would prefer a bath. But really, it doesn't matter. All you have to do for this section is just answer the questions. While Olden does put pressure on you by asking you to gain 100 points on this quiz, you don't really have to. There is a way to get 100 points instantly and just answer all the wrong questions, because the final question, if you answer correctly, instantly gives you 100 points. So you can stack almost all these questions or get every single answer wrong and get 100 points or over 100 points. This question, Olden asks, what would you rather go on for your honeymoon? A tropical island or somewhere cold? I don't know about you, but here in America, the general consensus to a honeymoon is a tropical island or somewhere very exotic and somewhere close to a beach. I don't know if that way of thinking applies to anywhere else. So, if you do know, please leave a comment and do subscribe. The final question really is foreshadowing. If you had to choose between Toki or Toa, who would you choose? The fastest menu is choosing Toki, but the correct answer, which gives 100 points, is I can't choose. And really, this is reflective of the ending, and this is foreshadowing towards the end. Long story short, you are going to have to choose between Toki and Toa. But if you play New Game Plus, and if you play your cards right, you can actually choose both. There is an affection meter that I really menu over and really don't care about that helps influence the choice. But really, there is one final choice at the end of the game, regardless of whom you are trying to court. It doesn't matter if you completely court Toki. At that final menu, you can choose Toa, and the game will give you the Toa ending. But even if we don't complete this question and trial, and we don't get all the answers right, and we don't get the perfect score that Olden wants us to, we still get something old. The way Olden gives us something old is that he has to have a bodily movement in order to release himself of something old and give that something old physically to us. This is something that is all of the something for gods do. They poop it out. Right here, I'm going to menu a new weapon. specifically the Angelic Sword. This is the point in the game where I completely stop using Toki to fight. And this is where I exclusively use Toa to fight, because Toa and Rising Dragon deal the most amount of damage. And this is going to be the first difficulty spike after Nether Drake, Ainu. Ainu is a play on Apple and iPod. In fact, this game somehow predicted the hipster meme, because Ainu specifically mentions that he goes completely vegan, eats granola, and this game is prophetic. That's all I'm going to say. The translators behind this game knew that in the year 2012 plus 8, we would still be making these jokes and these would be culturally relevant.
Just like before.
Yeah, you're right. I wonder if that's how all of the Something 4 are created.
In fact, the game even points out the weirdness of how the Something 4 are made. They just make bowel movements.
Yeah, I really doubt that's all there is to it.
And we're gonna show you a fight with Ainu. I don't think Ainu is even capable of doing something like that. Ainu is a floating rock with vines sticking out of it. Just don't think about it too hard. It's an image epic game. Anyway, back to some of the tech at hand. Now that we have Time Surge and the resource pool of time points are refreshed every time we go back to our home. So every time we go back to our home, we completely recover our health and we completely recover our time points. So we have 3 time points to use every single time we enter a new area. What we can do to this is when we enter a random battle now, we can enter Time Surge to accelerate the rate at which we escape. This is going to be a very challenging fight, so I will commentate all of this. So when we enter this fight, we enter Time Surge immediately. The problem is, Ainu will have this defensive phase where he will block us. What I did is when I did this cast, I cast Dragon of Battle. When Ainu drops below and dips below Toki's waist, he will use this attack that will instantly kill us. So we have to counter with Rising Dragon. Rising Dragon does about 10,000 now. Okay, he is in Dizzy. Notice how he is not attacking us. Notice our attack is now at 10,000 range. So notice how Time Surge dropped and it popped up again. In this fight, Time Surge drops the moment you get out of Dizzy. So I have to keep this timing very strict. So notice how I'm using a series of 1-2 break, 1-2 break, 1-2 break, skill, 1-2 break, 1-2 break, 1-2 break, skill. This is the timing that I developed. Mokapuyo uses a slightly faster timing and I can't replicate that because if I were to do his timing, I would end up doing a 3-hit combo, which is very slow. So I have this very consistent strategy where it's 1-2 break, 1-2 break, 1-2 break, skill. For me, that gives me a lot of SP to work with because I want to build up to 100 SP. So that way, whenever I use Rising Dragon, I have in excess of 30 SP because my maximum skill pool right now is 100. So since I have that extra 30 SP, I can make 6 attacks, which bring me up to 90 SP. But in addition to the time that it takes to use all of those attacks, I can get an additional 1 SP to bring me back to 100 SP. So I will be talking about more of the complexity of the battle system a little bit later when we get to the Chapter 3 boss. Right now, we're going to Burrow's Garden, Burrow, a play on borrow, because she is going to give us something borrowed. And what we have to do is go to the Royal Crypt, where we're essentially going to be grave robbers to get something borrowed. Here I'm getting an item called the Super Spicy Candy, and this is the Mega Spicy Candy. And this is something that is unique to my route because Mokopuyo doesn't do this, but what the Mega Spicy Candy does, it completely negates all random battles for a much shorter amount of time compared to the duration of Spicy Candy. Here I preemptively menu in a pepper because I have the bad tendency to go through the rest of this chapter as Toki instead of Toa, and for me that's rip run because once I enter a battle I have to load from a save in order to get back out of that battle, and throughout this entire run I do not save, so it's kind of a stressful fight. It's kind of a stressful run and kind of a stressful fight, so I want to do everything I can just in preparation for it. The Royal Crypt dialogue gets a little bit funny because we don't run into any random battles, so I'm just going to let it play out.
Pretty dangerous, right?
Our mom and dad said it was so bad, even just paying a visit was too dangerous to consider. But I actually kind of like it. It lets me hone my skills while paying respects to our ancestors.
It's literally a life or death situation.
Keep in mind that every time they have these dialogue boxes, it's usually dialogue. This dialogue pops up every single time after a random battle or before a random battle, just so it feels a little more organic when they're talking. But because we're using spicy candies and mega spicy candies, the game doesn't really know how to handle that, so it just lets us play. It plays out all of these dialogue it plays out all this dialogue since we're passing certain checkpoints, regardless of whether we enter a fight or not. So when the game tries to lampshade the fact that there are a lot of random battles and we don't have random battles, it gets a little bit weird. But really, this is the same game that thinks the best way to defeat an evil dragon that grants wishes is to report him to the government Better Business Bureau. So I don't know, man. I think here I accidentally menued in a spicy candy where I shouldn't have, so I purchased an extra spicy candy just to make sure I have all of those ready. The thing about this run is that while the item route does look strict, I mostly just made the item route just so it looks very clean. In Mokopuyo's route, he is jumping back and forth between purchasing condor wings, dragon wings, and spicy candies. But with me, I try to organize the purchases in such a way where I just purchase multiple dragon wings once, and I don't have to deal with it ever again. We're using this new item that we've actually been using for quite a while, the Dragon Wing. The Dragon Wing is a more expensive version of the Condor Wing because it immediately sends us back to our house. That saves us a little bit of menu time, and a little bit of load time, so I do like that. We use about 6 of them in the run, whereas with the Dragon Wings we use about 11 in the run. At this point in the game, we're almost done collecting all the something 4, but when we go back home and report to Eddie, Enda and Reijo are worried that because Weddy went off on her own to help recruit a golem, we think she's in danger. So what we want to do is make sure that she's safe.
Man, this forest is huge.
We need to catch up with
What I did here when I entered was kind of show off the how well routed this particular area is. So if you notice, I almost built up to when we enter a random encounter, and right before that bar filled up, I use a mega spicy candy in order to completely pause the encounter rate. And you're going to notice that once I hit the particular objective, and when we find Weddy, it's going to increase just a little bit more, and then we enter the event and do not enter a fight. So this is just me showing off, really. So this is really... we're nearing the end of the game, and this is really the last stretch of long distance we have to travel, because Chapter 4 is really fight after fight after fight. But after this stretch of forest and just a small stretch of traveling through the final area, or the final member of the Something 4, we really don't have to use spicy candies anymore, so we are completely done with that. And really, this is the bulk of the game, just running back and forth. The spikes of difficulty are there. I did show the Ainu fight. Robos is very challenging, but for the most part, there's a lot of breaks, and this is why I kind of like this game, and why I really dislike this game as well, because you really don't have to do much in this game, but when it picks up, it really does pick up. So if you get a bad time, it's another hour of just running through a forest and having a very cheeky saxophone just play semi-spooky music. But here, we think Weddy's in trouble, but it turns out she managed to convince a golem to be her friend and help her in case anything goes wrong. So we're really showing, this chapter really shows Weddy's preparation and almost strength as someone being prepared for anything.
Do some lunch. Let's go somewhere and enjoy it later.
That's something with really all the chapters do show in Time and Eternity. They revolve around Toki's friends and show them and try to give them a little bit of nuance and show how much they mean to Toki and how much the characters and how much Toki means to them. So it does give a little bit more characterization. If I can get a pot shot in an Image Epic game, this is way more characterization than Takahaya ever received in 7th Dragon and 7th Dragon 2022. So, yeah, Image Epic is capable of making good characters and a pretty okay plot. Here, we're reaching the final of the Something 4 gods, and what Dracois wants is... he wants a cake. Not just any cake. A cake from Ricardo. We know how bad Ricardo's cakes are. They're bad enough to make you hallucinate and become a spiritual medium, but Dracois wants a good cake. At this time, we have gone back... we haven't gone back too far in time, but we've gone forward enough in time that Ricardo is taking his dedication to making reasonably tasty cakes very seriously. So much to the point that he and his crew are doing this over-the-top training sequence where they are whipping cream on top the precipice of a cliff. The cake looks a little bit more appetizing, and when we report to Dracois, Dracois says that this cake is almost average. So, as a result, he is very impressed with the quality of Ricardo's cakes and decides to poop out something blue, which is really just a blue orb. Afterwards, we get... Makimona does show up and takes the something 4 from us. She's still upset that she still hasn't found a boyfriend and goes all evil on us. And this is the hardest fight in the game. So, immediately I'm entering Time Splitter and using a broccoli. I'm using Bolt. Afterwards, I used Frost. What this does is a combination called Chemistry, which silences Makimona, because Makimona, in her first few seconds of battle, uses this unblockable attack, which will instantly kill us. So, afterwards, I enter... this is a bad fight, so I do die in this fight because I drop combos 3 times, and afterwards I say this is not recoverable, so I'm just going to die. I do have a backup strat for this, but the backup strat assumes that I make those combos. So notice how strong those attacks were. That was about 1,100. For reference, we have 2,500 health. So again, I hit Broccoli, enter Time Surge, use Bolt, use Frost, and that's perfect timing. I use Dragon of Battle, and I start using my combo. 1, 2, 1, 2, hit. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, hit. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, hit. And when you see Makimona slash, I try to count that number at 28. I know that my combo is going to drop at around 49 to 50. When Time Surge drops off at 50, I have to be in the animation for Rising Dragon, hit Time Surge, and continue hitting, otherwise I drop this combo. Now that Makimona is in Dizzy, you can deal about 35,000 damage, and if you keep that combo up, you can deal about 20,000 damage. Afterwards, to play it safe, I use the final attack chance, and use that to finish off Makimona. Now that we've defeated Makimona and convinced Makimona that it's okay to be single and it's okay to not have a boyfriend, we think we're done. So let's finally have our wedding, and let's just end this before we keep doing this same loop over and over again of solving a problem, going back to a wedding, getting the wedding crashed, solving the problem again. We want this loop broken. But before we do that, we're going to do our final menu in the game, where I sell all the items in order to get the strongest equipment in the game, which you can purchase. If you look at the item descriptions, it says recommended level whatever, like recommended level 50 or 60, but that's really just the game telling you that you should be at this level when this item is unlocked. There is no level requirement, so you can just equip it at level 1. You can equip all the endgame equipment at level 15. But now that we are done, we find out the very dark secret that Toki and Toa have been keeping hidden from us. It turns out when Toki and Toa were kids, they made a promise to always be together, and effectively, they promised to marry each other. That bind is so strong that it supersedes the marriage contract set by Toki and Zack. In order to nullify this contract, we have to choose between Toki or Toa. But before we can even do that, Mobius, or Sanders, decides to take advantage of the power of the Something 4 and wants to keep us in this Mobius loop forever. In order to do that, Mobius wants to erase our memories and completely remove the fact that we remember all of our adventures together, I think. This is the new Makimona fight, and this is significantly easier with our equipment. So, in fact, I can just drop the combos if I feel like it, but really it's the same strategy again because Makimona is going to use the instant kill attack, so you do have to silence her, but after then you just have to continue the fight as normally, and if you drop the combo, oh well, but it's going to be a little bit longer, but it's not catastrophic like in the Chapter 3 fight. The next fight we are going to have to go through is the Nether Dragon fight. So this is a gauntlet, but the Nether Dragon fight isn't really all that different. The Roboss fight, however, is. And I'll talk about that when that pops up. But right now, it's the same exact strat as we use in Chapter 2. So dodge when you see Nether Drake charging his attacks, or stop attacking when Nether Drake begins to charge his attacks, start moving when it comes towards you, and if you're lucky, use Dragon Barrier to interrupt or to attack through that because you will be invulnerable for a short amount of time. So notice how I'm attacking, and when he raises his hand, that means he's going to use a slow-moving fireball, so I will wait until that reaches half the screen and I move. When Nether Drake pulls out his hand and does the fast-moving single fireball, I keep moving. Notice how Dragon Barrier is up. I use Dragon Barrier preemptively. Getting hit is a time loss, and usually I want to avoid that. I misread Nether Drake poorly, so I just wasn't able to dodge in time. I just want to say that Nether Drake and Mobius successfully predicted Captain Torres of Ace Combat 7. Ace Combat 7 and its DLC was released only a few months ago, and the best line that Captain Torres says is talking about crisp white sheets. I can't believe they predicted a villain who wants freshly washed clothing. Next is Roboss Rematch. This is a really tricky fight because the Gatling gun attack that Roboss uses will kill you. This time it only kills you after one volley, so you have to be a little bit more protective because each shot does 800 damage. So what I'm going to do is dodge the first two attacks, use a broccoli, enter gamer time. Once I enter gamer time, I'm going to use the chemistry to silence, and then I'm going to buff myself and attack normally as I did with Makimona. Once I hit this phase, I have to be a little bit careful with my timing, so that way I hit and counter and stun Roboss, so that way he doesn't attack me and I have to dodge and break my combo. With this fight, I cannot use the fatal attack chance, so I have to keep my combo up, but I didn't because gamer time ran out and I wasn't being careful. But I can rebuild this no problem, and it's not going to affect me any. So I'd say this fight is easier. Of the 3 rematch fights, this is the hardest, and even then you can still drop your combos. The final fight against Mobius isn't actually all that hard. Really, all you have to do is heal, and that's about it. But what Mobius is trying to do is trying to mess up with the timeline so badly that they completely wipe our memories. So he wants kind of... Oh my god, he predicted Undertale. Anyway, what Mobius wants to do is go back in time and mess it up enough so that Toki doesn't know us, so we can repeat this entire loop again and again. Just like a reverse of Undertale. So now what Mobius Drake is trying to do here is showing one of his true forms, and that is a gigantic dragon that does the hustle, proving that Mobius Drake is in fact a 90s kid. The dialogue in this section is greatly different because in the Japanese version, what Mobius Drake says are a bunch of homonyms in Japanese. I believe it's kakom, 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 kakom. But all of those in Japanese they mean different things. And I don't know what it is because I don't know enough Japanese. But for this phase, we just have to let the dialogue play out. So in English, instead of doing homonyms, they just made a tongue twister with alliteratives. So right now, since Mobius Drake is now at 5,000 health, we can't really do much, so we have to wait till cutscene power helps us weaken the barrier and lets us beat him proper. But this is somehow even easier than Nether Drake because the attacks are even more telegraphed, and the small fireballs that rain down on us take much longer to fall. I'm also being notified from one of my friends that this game also predicted the love triangle between a red-headed girl, a blonde girl, that both share the same body and are then separated after a certain amount of time between one man. If this sounds like Xenoblade Chronicles 2, then you have Mikage to thank for predicting that. This is now the cutscene where we do fight Mobius Drake proper. It is worth noting that in the first phase where you couldn't bring Mobius Drake's health down to 50%, it's basically half the damage that you deal normally with these fireballs. So it takes the same amount of time, assuming that he has the same patterns, to defeat Mobius Drake. I don't bother using this attack, Ultimate Dragon Killer, because it deals the same amount of damage as the volley of Dragon Killers do. It takes a charge time. Here I'm just baiting out a very long attack, a very long Rain of Fire attack, because if you are lucky and he does a Rain of Fire attack into a straight fireball attack, you can block both at the same time, which saves you even more time, and just lets you attack and go ham on Mobius Drake. Okay, this is the final boss, and after this is going to be time. So, time does differ in according to Mokopuyo. So on the speedrun.com time, you end after the save prompt, but in his RTA in Japan 2018 run, he stopped when you fade to black after this fight. I use a pepper just to get me into the just to get me to Toa so I can fight, but the default ending here is the Toki ending. So the Mobius fight, I immediately go into Broccoli, and I do the same setup strat as I've been doing, where I use Bolt into Frost, into Dragon of Battle, into my attack. So Mobius has... Little Mobius has about 400,000 health, but is split between two parts. So once we get Mobius' health down to 200,000, we'll have to do a fatal attack chance, which is required to get us to the second phase. In the second phase, we just do the same thing again. We disengage, we set up our Frost and our Bolt combo, and we just go ham again and again. And that is going to be the fight. I also want to say that Little Mobius also predicted the big wave of SoundCloud rappers and that whole meme of Lil in front of all those rappers' names. We also hit stun, so we're going to be done soon, but what I do here every time I get hit and after I use Rising Dragon, I heal, just so that way my health is topped off. So if I were to be running this in a marathon event, time would be coming up very soon. Time is coming up. Time is now. So that's the run. This is Time and Eternity. It is a very bizarre game. It is very weird, but is surprisingly high skill. Provided I have good commentary, I really hope to show this in a marathon setting. This is Winterhof reminding you to please play this game if you can, or at least just watch the cutscenes, because I am not kidding when I say the story is weird. And you just have to experience the story. It's like watching a Boo movie. Just, if you can't play this game, watch the cutscenes. So the speedrun.com does add about a minute because we do have to go through the story, when we do have to go through all of the cutscenes, and at this point, Toki's memory has been wiped. So at the end of the game, we basically just convince her to marry a stranger, and it works. All right, and this is the speedrun, and thank you.